Hey everybody, good morning. Today we are going to be looking at our texts Antarctica and Africa, and we are actually going to be diving in a little bit deeper to figure out what do the words and illustrations reveal in these two stories. So we're going to be looking at some of the photographs that the illustrator has selected and figuring out how are those pictures and illustrations helping us to learn more about these two countries. So to begin with, we have our essential question. So our essential question says, what makes the world fascinating? So this whole time while we're reading, keep that essential question in the back of your mind and be thinking about different interesting places that you see and things that you hear about. Our focusing question says, what interesting natural features can people see in Africa and Antarctica? So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be reading about the natural features in the text. So a natural feature is something that is within the land. So a natural feature is something that was not created by humans. So a natural feature might be a mountain or a river or an ocean. So we're going to find parts in the books that really talk about the natural features on these two continents, and we're going to go from there. We're also going to work on creating a chart that will list all of our natural features, because later this week we're going to work on some opinion writing and we're going to answer which continent we would most want to visit based on their natural features. So to really make a good opinion, we are going to have to kind of do our research and figure out about all of these different natural features so that we can make an educated opinion about which one we want to visit. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at our Africa book, and we're going to turn here to page 14. And we're turning to page 14 because this says wild places. So we know that this part of the text is going to tell us about different places. So that is the most relevant to our question looking at natural features. So let's read this. Africa has deserts. The Sahara is the world's largest desert. It is very hot and dry. So how does this picture help us to understand what that word dry means? So let's look in that picture. Let's see, I don't see any water. I see very few plants. Don't see any trees. So we can see that this is a picture of a desert, right? And what else does the picture show us that's not in the text? The picture shows us camels. The picture shows us dunes and sand. So in the text, it does not say camels walk across the desert and there's sand and there's not a lot of water. It doesn't say that. But we can gather that information by looking at the picture. So remember, we've talked about this before, but it's especially fun and important to look at the pictures or the illustrations in a nonfiction text, because sometimes the pictures can tell you just as much as the text. All right, so we will need to put hot and dry deserts on our chart because that was one of the natural features we just learned about in Africa. So here is my chart, and here I have hot and dry deserts. And then I just drew like a little line because I wanted to represent the desert somehow in case I forgot that. And my heading for my chart says Natural Features Africa. So let's keep reading to see if we can find more natural features. Africa has grassy places called savannas. Savannas have wet seasons and dry seasons. So how does this picture help us understand more about a savanna? So down here it says savannas have few trees. So we know that few means not a lot, just a little. And so here we can see that the savanna has a lot of grass. Looks like pretty thick grass, but not many trees, and it's a really big area. So that's a new natural feature we just learned about Africa. So we're going to put it now on our chart. You can make a chart too at home if you want, if you would like. So I put grassy savannas because the author did not just say savannas. The author described it, used a descriptive word, and said grassy savannas. So that's why I put grassy savannas there. All right, let's see if we can see anything more. There are rainforests in Africa. It rains almost every day in the forest. Many kinds of plants grow there. So in that word rainforest, we hear two words. We hear rain and forest. It's a compound word. So by looking at that picture, what can you tell me about a rainforest? I see lots of green things, lots of plants growing. I see some sunlight, but I see it doesn't, if we compare it to the desert, it looks very different, right? So a rainforest rains a lot, so there's a lot of water and there's a lot of things growing. So while the desert and the rainforest are very different natural features, they both exist on the same continent. You can find both of these things on the continent of Africa. So a lot of continents will have very, very different natural features within the same continent, just depending on where you go. So I'm going to add green rainforest to my chart. So that is my third little point, and I said green rainforest, and I drew a little green leaf to help me remember it so that I can go back. All right, and then we're gonna go to our next section that says water and land, because that's gonna tell us about some additional natural features. So it says the Nile River in Africa is the world's longest river. People live near rivers so they can get water. So, wow, that's really neat. The world's longest river is called the Nile River, and it goes through several African countries. So I wrote down long Nile River. Long is that descriptive word. People also say adjectives. So long Nile River, and then I just drew a really long river to help me remember. Kilimanjaro is Africa's tallest mountain. People climb this mountain. They visit Africa to see its amazing animals, people, and places. So Mount Kilimanjaro is one of the tallest mountains in the world, and people like to climb it. A mountain is a natural feature, so that's going to finish our natural feature list for Africa. So tall mountains. This is called an evidence organizer because we're going to go back to this later when we are trying to decide which continent we would most want to visit. So now we have all of our evidence for what natural features were in our Africa book. So we don't have to look through this book over and over again. We can just look at our evidence organizer to help us. Now let's do the same with our book about Antarctica. So we're going to go to our section, and we can find our sections by looking at the table of contents. So it says, welcome to Antarctica, people of Antarctica. That's not going to tell us about natural features. Amazing animals. No, that's not going to tell us about the natural features. Ooh, ice, wind, and snow. I bet that will tell us about some of the natural features. So what we need to do is we need to follow along here. Oh, that's the number 19. So we need to go to page 19 to learn more about the natural features in Antarctica. Ice, wind, and snow. Antarctica has fierce winds that blow the snow. People must wear bright coats to see each other. So right away, just from the heading, which remember is at the top, we learn that Antarctica has ice, wind, and snow. And how does that picture help us to understand what life is like? How can we tell that there are really fierce winds? You can see that They are really bundled up. You can't even hardly see their faces. I see lots of things are covered in snow. So even though the wind is not like blowing in this picture and you can't, see the wind moving, you can tell that it's there because I see some snow moving across, and things are really just covered. Antarctica has tall mountains. Most are covered by ice and snow. Wow, so that's a neat natural feature. Tall mountains covered by ice and snow. So I'm going to make a very similar chart. And at the top, I put my heading, natural features, and then I put Antarctica, so I know what continent I'm talking about. And then I just saw really tall, snowy mountains, so I put a little mountain range. Antarctica has thick sheets of ice. Giant ice chunks can break off into the ocean. These chunks are called icebergs. So remember, natural features are something that are made already in the land. People have not made them. So how does this picture help us to figure out what those words, giant and thick, mean? So the icebergs are so big that they're almost like walls, and they're so thick, people can drive on them, they can walk on them. They are very, very sturdy. So there are giant, thick icebergs. So we're going to put that in our evidence organizer as well. And I forgot to write before that there's icy oceans. So of course the oceans are super cold in Antarctica, so we can write that as well. So now we have our 2 evidence organizers, and tomorrow when we talk about opinion writing, we're going to look back at these so that we can decide which continent we would rather visit. So here's my evidence organizer for Africa and my evidence organizer for Antarctica. So we're going to do that tomorrow. All right, everybody, I hope you have a fantastic day and you learned something new about Africa and Antarctica, and I will see you tomorrow.